Okay, so our last video showed how Mozart very cleverly added surface decorative material to go from a 1 chord to a 5 chord. This next one, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to go from a 5 chord to a 1 chord. And the way that Mozart does this one is he uses sliding first inversion triads down the scale. Now, these techniques that we're talking about here allow a composer, for instance the previous one, if you're going 5-4, 5-4 as he did, then technically in our chord map we're not allowed to go 5-4 in this time period. But the fact that he'd used 5-4 as a neighbor chord type of structure allowed him to use 5-4, 5-4 without, I mean, he was technically breaking what we call the rules. But the rules are all made after the fact to explain what's happening. And there are lots of exceptions to those rules, especially the chord map rule. When composers want to move somewhere, for instance, in this case, he wants to go from 5 to 1, but he wants to do it in an interesting way. So he plays this 5 chord. He's got this chord going. Then he goes to a 6. Now, 5 to 6 is allowed in the chord map because 5 usually goes to 1, and when you go 5 to 6, especially if you set it up with a trill, you're really setting up this next 1 chord to come in. The deceptive cadence is what he's doing here. So he's setting up his same thing, and then he goes to a 6th chord, and then goes to a first inversion 6 chord, to a first inversion 5 chord, first inversion 4 chord, 3 chord, first inversion 2 chord, and finally he gets back to a first inversion 1 chord, which was his whole point. He just went from 5 to 1. He did it in a way that was completely outside of the chord map, going 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The chord map does not allow you to do that. But your ear hears that as a sense of organization. I mean, they can clearly hear, your ear can hear the structure. And it gives the notes a sense of organization that's different from the chord map structure. One thing to point out here, the fact that he put it in first inversion and the fact that he had the root in the 5th, like one of the reasons you don't do, the chord map doesn't allow you to do 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as chords, is if you were to do that in root position, for instance, we would have parallel 5ths between the root and the 5th. And that's not allowed. Still, even when you're breaking the rules, you shouldn't do parallel 5ths and octaves. So what he does is he inverts that interval. Instead of parallel 5ths, meaning the first chord, if it were B on the bottom and F sharp on top in that B minor chord, then that would have a 5th, and as he went down the scale, he would just be playing parallel 5ths, which he doesn't want. So what he does is he inverts that. He puts the B up on top. Now I got F sharp and B, and then he goes down the scale and parallel 4ths. Parallel 4ths are not, they still sound a little odd, but they're not a problem like parallel 5ths would be to your ear. Okay, thank you.